Automotive industry.
The automotive industry is a wide range of companies and organizations involved in the design, development, manufacture, marketing, and selling of motor vehicles. It is one of the world's most important economic sectors by revenue. The automotive industry does not include industries dedicated to the maintenance of automobiles following delivery to the end user, such as automobile repair shops and motor fuel filling stations. The term automotive was created from Greek autos, self, and Latin motivus, of motion, to represent any form of self-powered vehicle. This term was proposed by SAE member Elmer Sperry.
History.
The automotive industry began in the 1890s with hundreds of manufacturers that pioneered the horseless carriage. For many decades, the United States led the world in total automobile production. In 1929, before the Great Depression, the world had 32,028,500 automobiles in use, and the U.S. automobile industry produced over 90% of them. At that time the U.S. had one car per 4.87 persons. After World War II, the U.S. produced about 75% of world's auto production. In 1980, the U.S. was overtaken by Japan and became world's leader again in 1994. In 2006, Japan narrowly passed the U.S. in production and held this rank until 2009, when China took the top spot with 13.8 million units. With 19.3 million units manufactured in 2012, China almost doubled the U.S. production, with 10.3 million units, while Japan was in third place with 9.9 million units.
Safety.
Safety is a state that implies to be protected from any risk, danger, damage or cause of injury. In the automotive industry, safety means that users, operators or manufacturers do not face any risk or danger coming from the motor vehicle or its spare parts. Safety for the automotives themselves implies that there is no risk of damage. Safety in the automotive industry is particularly important and therefore highly regulated. Automobiles and other motor vehicles have to comply with a certain number of norms and regulations, whether local or international, in order to be accepted on the market. The standard ISO 26262 is considered as one of the best practice framework for achieving automotive functional safety. In case of safety issues, danger, product defect or faulty procedure during the manufacturing of the motor vehicle, the maker can request to return either a batch or the entire production run. This procedure is called product recall. Product recalls happen in every industry and can be production-related or stem from the raw material. Product and operation tests and inspections at different stages of the value chain are made to avoid these product recalls by ensuring end-user security and safety and compliance with the automotive industry requirements. However, the automotive industry is still particularly concerned about product recalls, which cause considerable financial consequences.
Economy.
Around the world, there were about 806 million cars and light trucks on the road in 2007, consuming over 260 billion U.S. gallons, 980 million m3, of gasoline and diesel fuel yearly. The automobile is a primary mode of transportation for many developed economies. The Detroit branch of Boston Consulting Group predicts that, by 2014, one-third of world demand will be in the four BRIC markets: Brazil, Russia, India and China. Other potentially powerful automotive markets are Iran and Indonesia. Emerging auto markets already buy more cars than established markets. According to a J.D. Power study, emerging markets accounted for 51% of the global light vehicle sales in 2010. The study expects this trend to accelerate.
World motor vehicle production. By year.
Global production of motor vehicles. Cars and commercial vehicles.
By manufacturer.
Rank of manufacturers by production, 2012. OICA defines these entries as follows. Passenger cars are motor vehicles with at least four wheels, used for the transport of passengers, and comprising no more than 8 seats in addition to the driver's seat. Light commercial vehicles, LCV, are motor vehicles with at least 4 wheels, used for the carriage of goods. Mass given in tons, metric tons, is used as a limit between light commercial vehicles and heavy trucks. This limit depends on national and professional definitions and varies between 3.5 and 7 tons. Minibuses, derived from light commercial vehicles, are used for the transport of passengers, comprising more than 8 seats in addition to the driver's seat and having a maximum mass between 3.5 and 7 tons. Heavy trucks, HCV, are vehicles intended for the carriage of goods. Maximum authorized mass is over the limit, ranging from 3.5 to 7 tons, of light commercial vehicles. They include tractor vehicles designed for towing semi-trailers. Buses and coaches are used for the transport of passengers, comprising more than 8 seats in addition to the driver's seat, and having a maximum mass over the limit, ranging from 3.5 to 7 tons, of light commercial vehicles.
Company relationships.
It is common for automobile manufacturers to hold stakes in other automobile manufacturers. These ownerships can be explored under the detail for the individual companies. Notable current relationships include AB Volvo and Attra Motors has a 50% joint venture called VE Commercial Vehicles. Anadolu Group and Isuzu have a 50% joint venture called Anadolu Isuzu. Beijing Automotive Group has a joint venture with Daimler called Beijing Benz. Both companies hold a 50% stake. Both companies also have a joint venture called Beijing Foton Daimler Automobile. BAG also has a joint venture with Hyundai called Beijing Hyundai. Both companies hold a 50% stake. BMW and Brilliance have a joint venture called BMW Brilliance. BMW owns a 50% stake, Brilliance owns a 40.5% stake, and the Shenyang municipal government owns a 9.5% stake. Chang Automobile Group has 3 joint ventures, one with PSA Peugeot Citroën, CAPSA, both hold a 50% stake, one with Suzuki, Changan Suzuki, both hold a 50% stake, and one with Ford and Mazda, Changan Ford Mazda. CAG holds a 50% stake, Ford holds a 35% stake, and Mazda holds a 15% stake. Changan and Ford have a joint venture called Chang Ford Nanjing. Jiangling and Chang have a joint venture called Jiangxi Jiangling. Tri has a joint venture with Tata Motors called Tri Jaguar Land Rover. Both companies hold a 50% stake. Tri and Israel Corporation has a joint venture called Coros. Both companies hold a 50% stake. Daimler AG holds a 20% stake in Attra Motors, a 10.0% stake in KAMAZ, an 89.29% stake in Mitsubishi Fuso Truck and Bus Corporation, a 4.7% stake in Tesla Motors, a 6.75% stake in Tata Motors and a 3.1% in the Renault-Nissan Alliance, a 12% stake in Beijing Automotive Group, and an 85% stake in Master Motors. Daimler and BYD Auto have a joint venture called Denza. Both companies hold a 50% stake. Dongfeng Motor Corporation and Nissan have a 50% joint venture called Venucia, and another 50% joint venture called Dongfeng Motor Company. Dongfeng and PSA Group have a 50% joint venture called Dongfeng Peugeot Citroën, a 50% joint venture with Honda called Dongfeng Honda, a joint venture with AB Volvo called Dongfeng Nissan Diesel. Fiat holds a 90% stake in Ferrari, 100% of Chrysler, a 67% stake in Fiat Automobili SRBIJA and 37.8% of Toffers with another 37.8% owned by Koch Holding. Fiat Automobili SRBIJA owns a 54% stake in Zastava Trucks. Fiat Industrial owns a 46% stake in Zastava Trucks. Ford Motor Company holds a 3% stake in Mazda, a 12.1% share in Aston Martin, a 49% share in Jiangling Motors. Ford and Navistar International have a 50-50 joint venture called Blue Diamond Truck. Ford and Solars JSC have a 50-50 joint venture called Ford Solars. Both Ford and Koch Holding own a 41% stake in Ford Otosan. Ford and Leo-Ho Group have a joint venture called Ford Leo-Ho. Ford owns 70% and Leo-Ho Group owns 30%. FAW Group and GM has a 50-50 joint venture called FAW-GM, a 50-50 joint venture with Volkswagen Group called FAW Volkswagen, and a 50-50 joint venture with Toyota called Sichuan FAW Toyota Motor, and both companies also have another joint venture called RANS. FAW Group owns 49% of Haima Automobile. Fujian Motors Group holds a 15% stake in King Long. FMG, China Motor, and Daimler has a joint venture called Fujian Benz. FMG, China Motor, and Mitsubishi Motors has a joint venture called Suost. FMG holds a 50% stake, and both China Motor and Mitsubishi Motors holds an equal 25% stake. Geely Automobile holds a 23% stake in Manganese Bronze Holdings. General Motors holds a 20% stake in Industries Mécaniques Magbines. General Motors and Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, SAIC, and has two joint ventures in Shanghai General Motors and SAIC GM Wuling Automobile. Both also hold an equal 50% stake in General Motors India Private Limited. And General Motors holds a 94% stake in GM Korea, and SAIC Group holds a 6% stake. General Motors and Yusuf Tozanot have a joint venture called GM Uzbekistan. Yusuf Tozanot owns 75% and General Motors owns 25%. General Motors and Yusuf Tozanot also have a joint venture called Daewoo of To, both each hold a 50-50 stake. GM, Avtovaz, and EBRD have a joint venture called GM Avtovaz. Both GM and Avtovaz owns 41.61% and EBRD owns 16.76%. Hyundai Motor Group and Kiba Holding has a joint venture called Hyundai Asan Automotive. Hyundai Motor Group owns 70% and Kiba Holding owns 30%. Isuzu and General Motors has a 50-50% joint venture called Isuzu Trucks South Africa. Isuzu owns 10% of Industries Mécaniques Magbines. Isuzu, Solars JSC, and Imperial Sijs have a joint venture called Solars Isuzu. Solars JSC owns 66%, Isuzu owns 29%, and Imperial Sijs owns 5%. Mahindra and Navistar International has a joint venture called Mahindra Trucks and Buses Limited. Mahindra owns 51% and Navistar International owns 49%. MAN SE holds a 17.01% voting stake in Scania. MAN and Yusuf Tozanot have a joint venture called MAN Auto Uzbekistan. Yusuf Tozanot owns 51% and MAN owns 49%. Marcopolo owns 19% of New Flyer Industries. Navistar International and JAC has a joint venture called Anhui Jiangui Navistar. Nissan owns 43% of Nissan Shitai. Porsche Automobile Holding SE has a 50.74% voting stake in Volkswagen Group. The Porsche automotive business is fully owned by the Volkswagen Group. PSA Peugeot Citroën and Toyota have a 50-50% joint venture called Toyota Peugeot Citroën Automobile Czech, and another joint venture with Chang called Chang PSA Automobile. Renault and Nissan Motors have an alliance, Renault-Nissan Alliance, involving two global companies linked by cross-shareholding, with Renault holding 44.3% of Nissan shares, and Nissan holding 15% of, non-voting, Renault shares. The alliance holds a 3.1% share in Daimler AG. Renault holds a 25% stake in Avtovaz and an 80.1% stake in Renault Samsung. SAIPA holds a 51% stake in Pask Hodro. Solars JSC is involved in joint ventures with Ford, Ford Solars, and Mazda to produce cars. Toyota holds a 51% stake in Daihatsu, 16.5% in Fuji Heavy Industries, parent company of Subaru, and a 10% stake in Tesla. Volkswagen Group holds a 37.73% stake in Scania, 68.6% voting rights, a 53.7% stake in MANSE, 55.9% voting rights, and a 99.55% stake in the Audi Group. Volkswagen is integrating Scania, MAN and its own truck division into one division. Volkswagen Group has a 19.9% stake in Suzuki, and Suzuki has a 5% stake in Volkswagen. Packer Incorporated has a 19% stake in Tatra. Tata Motors also formed a joint venture with Fiat and gained access to Fiat's diesel engine technology. Tata Motors sells Fiat cars in India through a 50/50 joint venture Fiat Automobiles India Limited, and is looking to extend its relationship with Fiat and Iveco to other segments. Tata and Marcopolo have a Tata Marcopolo. Tata owns 51% and Marcopolo owns 49%. ZAP owns 51% of Zhejiang Zhongwei.